cheating billionaire husband regrets divorce, wants to keep his ex-wife, but she has given up. A single envelope slid across the gleaming marble tabletop, the ornate gold lining glinting beneath the chandelier's light. Inside lay the divorce papers that would forever change two lives. This is the story of a billionaire named Alexander Moretti, whose insatiable thirst for excitement led him astray from the one woman who'd always believed in him, his wife, Victoria. Their journey was supposed to be a fairy tale of luxury and splendor, but hidden beneath all that opulence were secrets that unraveled their perfect world. Now, with regret looming over him like a thundercloud, Alexander struggles to reclaim the wife he cast aside. Alexander Moretti was born into a life of silver spoons and lavish galas. His father, Gio Moretti, had built a real estate empire from the ground up, eventually owning iconic properties across New York, London, and Hong Kong. From penthouse apartments overlooking Central Park to glass-walled mansions nestled in the Hollywood Hills, the Moretti name became synonymous with luxury and power. By the time Alexander inherited the empire, he was already celebrated as one of the youngest billionaires in the country. Victoria Diaz, on the other hand, had humble roots in a suburb of Seattle. While studying accounting at the University of Washington, she'd often dream of building a stable life for herself and her mother, who worked two jobs to make ends meet. Victoria's beauty was as quiet as her determination. Her striking dark eyes had a gentle warmth, and her reserved smile belied a fierce sense of ambition. She was not the type to seek attention, and yet, in a room of 1,000 people, it was often Victoria who stood out for her genuine kindness. Fate brought them together during a charity gala in Miami, hosted by the influential business magnate Richard Branson. Victoria attended as a volunteer accountant, managing the event's donations, while Alexander was a guest of honor, fresh off a multi-billion-dollar acquisition that had placed him on the cover of Forbes. He was tall and impeccably dressed in a tailored Armani suit, his dark hair brushed back in a style that reflected understated elegance. Victoria found herself handing him a pen to sign a check for a significant donation, and as their eyes met, electricity sparked. In that fleeting moment, an unspoken connection took hold on that would set the stage for a grand romance and, ultimately, heartbreak that neither could have imagined. In the weeks following their first encounter, Alexander reached out to the charity's organizers, requesting Victoria's contact information under the pretense of confirming the final donation details. The moment he heard her voice on the phone, something in him shifted. Her gentle confidence and no-nonsense demeanor drew him in like a mystery he was eager to solve. Their first date was at a private restaurant on the rooftop of the Moretti Tower in Manhattan. The night sky glittered with stars, and the city below pulsed with life. Candles flickered on the table, and a full moon bathed them in soft light. She wore a simple black cocktail dress, elegant yet conservative. He presented her with a single red rose, a gesture that made her blush. Conversation flowed effortlessly. They talked about her mother's struggles, about his father's legacy, and about the philanthropic work Alexander secretly cherished. Victoria teased him about his billionaire lifestyle, and he laughed in a way he rarely dyed a deep, genuine laughter that crinkled the corners of his eyes. The steely facade he'd constructed for the business world melted away in her presence. Alexander was used to flattery and opportunistic acquaintances, but there was no trace of pretension in Victoria. She never once asked about his fortune. Instead, she asked about his dreams. She wasn't impressed by the panoramic view or the Michelin star menu, rather. She marveled at the authenticity. She glimpsed behind Alexander's polished exterior. By the end of the evening, he was smitten. Within a month, they had soared over Dubai in a private jet, strolled hand in hand through the Louvre in Paris, and shared laughs on a yacht off the coast of Capri. Their courtship was a whirlwind of exotic travel and candle-lit dinners, fueled by a passionate connection that seemed destined to lead to a happily ever after. The wedding took place in the lush gardens of Lake Como, Italy, a location cherished by celebrities and moguls alike. White roses, orchids, and peonies adorned the ceremony aisle, weaving a tapestry of floral elegance. The guest list read like a who's who of high society, CEOs, Hollywood actors, and philanthropic powerhouses. Even Bill Gates, whom Alexander had met at a global health initiative in Davos, sent a personal congratulatory message. Victoria stood at the altar in a bespoke Vera Wang gown that clung perfectly to her figure. The gentle lace detailing and subtle shimmer matched the glimmer in her eyes as she walked toward Alexander. Joe Moretti watched from the front row, pride and relief etched into his distinguished features. To see his only son finally settle down with a woman of integrity gave him confidence in the future of the Moretti empire. The officiant spoke of love, trust, and fidelity. When Alexander repeated the vow to remain faithful and cherish her above all others, he held Victoria's gaze, his voice trembling with sincerity. In that instant, everyone present believed they were witnessing a union that would stand the test of time. Fireworks lit up the sky that evening, illuminating the lake's glassy surface in a riot of color. A world-class orchestra played gentle melodies as the newlyweds shared their first dance. Victoria's mother, Carmen, wept tears of joy, remembering the days she and her daughter had struggled just to pay rent. Now her child was marrying into one of the world's wealthiest families, but more importantly, she was marrying a man who seemed to adore her. No one imagined that beneath the surface of this storybook setting lay tiny fractures, the first subtle signs that not all was as perfect as it seemed. As Mr. and Miss S. Moretti settled into married life, media outlets clamored for every detail. Paparazzi often camped outside their Manhattan residence, capturing images of the couple on morning jogs or leaving upscale restaurants. Tabloid headlines ranged from their philanthropic endeavors like building schools in rural Ethiopia to speculation about when they would start a family. Even the most mundane aspects of their life became fodder for clickbait articles. For Victoria, the media frenzy was disorienting. One moment she was a small-town girl. The next, her photograph graced the cover of fashion magazines, labeled as a modern-day Cinderella. Her new wardrobe consisted of designer gowns, Louboutin heels, and diamond jewelry from Tiffany and Company, gifts from her adoring husband. Yet she often found herself reminiscing about the simple days in Seattle, where she'd meet friends for coffee and enjoy casual afternoons without the glare of 1,000 camera lenses. Alexander, on the other hand, thrived in the spotlight at least on the surface. He knew how to command a room, whether it was a corporate board meeting or a star-studded event in Beverly Hills. But the demands on his time grew exponentially. The Moretti empire was expanding into renewable energy, technology, and even space tourism. Meetings piled up and jet-setting became the norm. The hours he spent traveling or negotiating deals meant less time with Victoria, who began to feel more like a decorative accessory than an equal partner in his life. The tension between public adoration and private longing became an undercurrent in their marriage. While the world watched them smile for the cameras, only Victoria was privy to the stress lines forming on Alexander's brow. She worried about his health, his happiness, and their marriage. She wondered if their bond could withstand the tidal wave of pressure that accompanied a billionaire lifestyle. After the honeymoon phase, subtle shifts began to take place. Alexander was frequently traveling to Europe, Asia, and the Middle East to oversee new ventures. His ambition seemed unstoppable. Late-night phone calls and last-minute flights became the norm, and Victoria found herself alone in their penthouse more often than not. She attended business galas on his behalf, standing in for him at philanthropic events with a gracious smile plastered on her face. In the early days, Victoria didn't mind. She understood the demands placed on Alexander and took pride in representing him when he couldn't be present. Yet the cracks in their facade widened with each missed phone call and every unreturned message. She'd text him updates about her day lunch with her mother, an afternoon spent reorganizing the charity wing, but replies grew increasingly sporadic. Victoria confided in her best friend, Hannah Lee, whom she'd met during her college years. Hannah was a financial analyst in San Francisco, but visited New York when she could. Over coffee in a quiet Upper East Side cafe, Hannah encouraged Victoria to seek marriage counseling. However, Victoria dismissed the idea at first, convinced she and Alexander could work through the distance. After all, they'd promised each other a forever kind of love. One particular incident cemented the notion that all was not well. On the night of their first anniversary, Victoria arranged a special dinner at a newly opened Michelin star restaurant. She wore a shimmering red dress that accentuated her figure and sparkled with promise. As the hours ticked by, guests at nearby tables offered her sympathetic glances. Alexander never showed. His phone went straight to voicemail. In that moment, Victoria felt something inside her begin to wither, a fragile part of her soul that once believed in fairy tale endings. As the Moretti Empire ballooned, Alexander found himself brushing shoulders with Hollywood stars, tech icons like Elon Musk, and even political figures in Washington, D.C. At exclusive parties thrown by the likes of movie producer Jerry Bruckheimer, or on superyachts anchored off the coast of Monaco, temptation was an ever-present spectre. Model-esque women sought his attention with flattering smiles and bold flirtations. Initially, Alexander saw these advances for what they were: attempts to gain social clout or potential business connections. Yet the strain of near-constant travel, the adrenaline rush of billion-dollar deals, and the waning intimacy at home chipped away at his resolve. He found it exhilarating to be admired, a temporary balm for the guilt he felt over neglecting Victoria. Eventually, alcohol-fueled parties and after-hours gatherings blurred the lines between innocent fun and dangerous enticements. During a high-profile conference in Dubai, Alexander was introduced to a young social media influencer named Charmaine, known for her breathtaking Instagram posts and red carpet appearances at film festivals. With shimmering green eyes and an infectious laugh, Charmaine was the epitome of physical allure. She wasn't shy about her interest in Alexander, and the ease with which they connected caught him off guard. A single late-night text from Charmaine led to a rendezvous in a luxury penthouse suite, high above the glittering city lights. Their conversation began innocently enough banter about business and travel, but soon turned into flirtation that neither bothered to hide. By the end of the evening, Alexander crossed a line he had once sworn never to approach. His infidelity wasn't just a momentary lapse, it was the wedge that would eventually drive him and Victoria apart. But in the haze of night, fueled by the heady mix of power, money, and desire, he convinced himself it was a one-time mistake. News of Alexander's indiscretion spread through the exclusive circles of New York's elite, whispered in the corners of extravagant events and private clubs. People gossiped about the way he danced with Charmaine at a party on a yacht in Cannes, or how they were spotted sharing champagne at a luxurious suite in the Burj Al Arab. At first, it was all rumors without tangible proof, just the typical speculation that follows a wealthy power player wherever he goes. But as the months passed, the rumors gained momentum. Victoria began noticing subtle changes in Alexander's behavior. He'd come home later than usual, wearing a carefully composed mask of calm, as though suppressing a secret. He'd shower immediately upon arrival, claiming it helped him relax. Though she had no concrete evidence, Victoria's intuition told her something was amiss. She sensed a growing distance, more tangible than ever before. One night, as Alexander slept, Victoria found a lipstick-stained note in his jacket pocket. It read, "Call me anytime, XOXO. There was no name, just a phone number she didn't recognize. Her heart pounded as she read and reread the note, tears welling in her eyes. Doubt, suspicion, and betrayal clawed at her mind. But in her quiet, stoic way, she decided not to confront him just yet. She needed more answers before she tore apart the foundation of their marriage. Confused and lonely, Victoria confided in Hannah again, who urged her to talk to Alexander. Yet Victoria feared that if she brought up her suspicions, it would confirm a painful reality. The man she loved was already slipping away. Instead, she tried to be patient, hoping against hope that her husband would confess if indeed he had crossed a line that neither of them could ever uncross. The breaking point came one evening when Victoria decided to attend a charity gala without informing Alexander. She wanted to see for herself if the rumors were true. Dressed in a sleek navy gown, she arrived at the event, her heart pounding with an unsettling mix of dread and determination. She scanned the crowd, looking for her husband among the throngs of socialites and business moguls. When she finally spotted him, her breath caught in her throat. Alexander was standing off to the side, deep in conversation with Charmaine. The influencer's hand rested intimately on his arm. Their body language spoke volumes, and the sight made Victoria's stomach churn. She tried to remain composed, to gather the courage to approach them. But before she could move, Charmaine leaned up and whispered something in Alexander's ear, her laughter carrying just enough to make Victoria's blood run cold. The possessive way Charmaine clung to him, the guilty flicker in Alexander's eyes. Victoria had seen all she needed. Summoning every ounce of dignity, she walked up to them. Charmaine's grip on Alexander's arm loosened, and a flash of recognition crossed her face. If she was embarrassed, she didn't show it. She merely stepped aside, leaving husband and wife to face the storm that was about to erupt. "Care to introduce me to your friend?" Victoria asked, her voice a careful monotone masking her fury. Alexander stammered, trying to explain, but words failed him. The confrontation was brief, painfully direct. Within minutes, Victoria had turned and walked away, tears streaming down her face. That night, Alexander returned to an empty penthouse. Victoria had packed a small bag and left, leaving behind only a succinct note on the kitchen table. "I saw enough. I'm done." For weeks, neither Alexander nor Victoria spoke directly. Communication happened through terse emails or text messages about essential matters: finances, property, and the dissolution of shared assets. Alexander tried calling countless times, leaving voicemails filled with remorse, but Victoria listened to them silently, tears falling as she relived the betrayal. Each time she heard his voice, she moved into a modest apartment on the Upper West Side, a place she had rented under her own name, quiet, unassuming, and far from the spectacle of their former life. She informed only her mother and Hannah of her new address, refusing to entertain the curiosity of social climbers or the prying eyes of paparazzi. Alexander's father, Gio Moretti, tried to intervene. He offered words of wisdom, urging his son to seek therapy and fight for his marriage. But Alexander was trapped in a whirlwind of guilt, shame, and mounting anger, mostly directed at himself. In a moment of misguided desperation, he agreed to a quick divorce to free Victoria from the pain he had caused. Lawyers were hired, assets were categorized, and a court date was set. Through it all, Victoria remained resolute. She had quietly gathered evidence of Alexander's infidelity: photos, text messages, and even personal accounts from acquaintances who had witnessed his transgressions. She didn't want his money beyond what was fair, but she did want closure. And she wanted to remind him that love was not something to be bought and sold. The final papers arrived in a manila envelope, delivered by a somber-faced courier. With trembling hands, Victoria signed them. In one swift gesture, she relinquished the fairy tale dream and accepted the reality. The man she had loved so deeply no longer existed in the same form. Their marriage, once heralded as a modern Cinderella story, was now a cautionary tale. The official announcement of the divorce rattled social circles. Suddenly, Victoria's phone buzzed incessantly with messages of feigned sympathy from people who had barely bothered to know her before. Tabloids splashed sensational headlines across their front pages: Moretti's mistress exposed, Victoria's vengeance, and other lurid theories. Victoria ignored them all, focusing on reclaiming her personal space and emotional well-being. Alexander retreated into himself. For the first time, he found no solace in his wealth or his status. He stopped attending galas and business mixers, preferring to bury himself in work at Moretti Global headquarters. His father, Gio, watched in distress as his once brilliant son transformed into a shadow of his former self, missing deadlines, forgetting key appointments, and snapping at employees. In an attempt to distract himself, Alexander threw money at projects that, under normal circumstances, he would have approached cautiously. He invested millions in experimental tech startups, partnered with celebrities for questionable brand deals, and even commissioned the construction of a private art museum in downtown Manhattan. None of it filled the void inside him. Meanwhile, Victoria focused on self-reflection. She sought therapy to process the trauma of betrayal and the sudden shift in her identity. Sessions with Dr. Wilson, a calm and empathetic psychologist, helped her articulate the sense of loss she felt, not just of Alexander, but of the life they had built together. In those therapy sessions, she realized she had been losing herself for a long time, swept up in the tidal wave of Alexander's ambitions. Emerging from her cocoon of pain, Victoria found new purpose. She began volunteering at a non-profit organization, Project Hope, which provided job training for women from disadvantaged backgrounds. In helping them, she found a seed of strength within herself, a reminder that she was more than a billionaire's discarded wife. Late one night, Alexander sat alone in his office, staring at the cityscape through floor-to-ceiling windows. He sipped a glass of whiskey, but its warmth offered no comfort. The silence of the empty corridors pressed in on him, echoing the silence in his once lively home. On his desk was a framed photograph of him and Victoria on their wedding day. She was beaming, and he was gazing at her as though she were his entire world. Alexander traced her outline with his fingertip, a hollow ache gnawing at his insides. Gio Moretti walked in unannounced, his expression stern yet concerned. He quietly closed the door behind him. "When are you going to fight for her?" he asked, voice low. Alexander turned away, ashamed. He mumbled something about the divorce being final, but Gio shook his head. "It's never final if your heart still beats for her." That conversation planted the first real seed of determination in Alexander's mind. While he had felt regret before, it had been buried beneath layers of denial and self-pity. Now, he began to piece together a plan, attempt to win Victoria back. He started small, sending her flowers every day for a week. Red roses, daisies, lilies, each bouquet accompanied by a heartfelt note apologizing for his failures. Victoria accepted the deliveries but refused to reply. Undeterred, he sent a letter detailing his remorse, explaining how he had lost himself in the chaos of wealth and ambition. Still, no response. Desperate for any sign of hope, Alexander confided in Hannah, begging her to mediate. Hannah, loyal to Victoria, was skeptical. She told Alexander that Victoria had moved on in many ways, though she still carried the scars. If he truly wanted her back, it would take more than grand gestures. It would require genuine change. Just when Alexander thought he had reached the nadir of his misery, new revelations came to light. An investigative journalist, Stephanie Rowland, published an expose on Charmaine, the influencer who had triggered the downfall of his marriage. The article revealed that Charmaine had orchestrated similar entanglements with other wealthy men, seeking notoriety and financial gain. She had allegedly sold exclusive stories to tabloids, embellishing the details for profit. Suddenly, Alexander realized he might have been just another pawn in Charmaine's quest for fame. While he couldn't excuse his own infidelity, the extent of Charmaine's manipulation intensified his self-loathing. He felt used, and worse, he had allowed his marriage to crumble for a woman whose intentions were far from genuine. In a moment of desperation, Alexander reached out to Stephanie Rowland, requesting a meeting. Over lunch at a quiet bistro in Soho, she showed him evidence mails and text messages from Charmaine to gossip bloggers, discussing how to maximize tabloid coverage. Alexander stared at the incriminating messages, feeling a sickening twist in his stomach. "This is bigger than you, Mr. Moretti," Stephanie warned. "It's not just about an affair. It's about the dangers of being in the public eye. People will exploit you if you let them." Though the information offered little consolation, it gave Alexander a strange sense of clarity. He had endangered the most precious relationship in his life over something orchestrated by a con artist. Yet, the blame still rested squarely on his shoulders. He had made the choice. He had betrayed Victoria. The meeting ended, and Alexander felt a whirlwind of emotions: rage, shame, regret. More than ever, he yearned to speak with Victoria, to explain the truth, even if it was too late to salvage what they once had. In her apartment on the Upper West Side, Victoria slowly reclaimed her sense of self. Early each morning, she'd lace up her running shoes and jog through Central Park. The exercise cleared her mind, offering a brief moment of serenity amidst the chaos of her lingering heartbreak. She took up painting, finding solace in the bright colors and fluid strokes on canvas. At Project Hope, Victoria threw herself into her work. She helped women develop financial literacy skills, teaching them how to budget and invest. She drew from her own experiences, emphasizing self-worth, resilience, and the importance of having a plan. Her empathy and practical know-how quickly gained her respect among both staff and clients. Around this time, she reconnected with a former college classmate, Daniel Cruz. They had worked on group assignments at the University of Washington and had remained casual friends on social media. Now living in Manhattan, Daniel had become a rising star in the tech world, developing cutting-edge apps for large corporations. He reached out to Victoria, asking if she would like to grab coffee and catch up. The two met at a cozy cafe near Washington Square Park. Conversation flowed easily as they reminisced about college days, late-night study sessions, cheap pizza joints, and the camaraderie of youth. Daniel listened intently when Victoria spoke about her new life, her volunteer work, and the emotional toll of her divorce. He offered no judgment, just genuine understanding. Over time, their bond deepened. He admired her resilience, and she found comfort in his unwavering support. Though Victoria wasn't ready for a romantic relationship, she welcomed Daniel's friendship. His presence became a reminder that life could indeed go on, that happiness might still be possible, even if it didn't involve returning to the gilded cage of her past. Feeling cornered by guilt and the looming sense of loss, Alexander decided to go all in on reconciling with Victoria. He organized a lavish gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art under the guise of a charity fundraiser for Project Hope. Through various channels and discreet inquiries, he knew Victoria deeply cared for this organization. He donated a significant sum to sponsor scholarships for underprivileged women who showed promise in finance and business. Invitations went out to celebrities, philanthropists, and well-known public figures. Victoria received hers in a handwritten envelope, personally signed by Alexander. The letter stated that all proceeds from the event would benefit Project Hope's new initiatives. Torn between her animosity toward Alexander and her devotion to the cause, Victoria ultimately decided to attend. After all, it was for the women she was committed to helping. On the night of the event, the Met's Grand Hall shimmered with opulent decor. A string quartet played gentle music as attendees sipped champagne. Victoria arrived in a simple yet elegant black gown, refusing any extravagance that might appear as if she were stepping back into the billionaire world. She scanned the room, spotting some familiar faces from her previous life. Whispers followed her like a shadow. Everyone knew the drama behind the divorce. When Alexander finally approached her, he stood nervously, looking more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. His once confident demeanor was replaced by contrition etched into every feature. He thanked her for attending and for all she had done with Project Hope. Then he presented a check that nearly doubled the charity's operating budget for the following year. Despite his efforts, Victoria remained guarded. She acknowledged his gesture as meaningful for the organization, yet her eyes held a distance he couldn't breach. Alexander understood that one grand gesture wouldn't erase months of betrayal. As the gala progressed, an unexpected conversation took place between Victoria and Gio Moretti. The patriarch had always treated her with respect, even warmth, during her marriage to Alexander. When he spotted her alone near a marble column, he gently tapped her shoulder. Turning to see him, Victoria was surprised by the melancholy in his usually stoic eyes. "I owe you an apology," Gio began, his voice weighed down by regret. He admitted that he had encouraged Alexander to focus on expanding the Moretti empire, thinking it would secure their family legacy. In doing so, he now realized he had inadvertently driven a wedge between the couple. "I'm not excusing Alexander's actions," he continued, "but I do take responsibility for pushing him so hard. I never intended for him to lose you." Victoria listened quietly, her emotions churning. She respected Gio, yet she couldn't shake the lingering sting of Alexander's betrayal. Still, the older man's sincerity was clear. He wanted nothing more than to see them reconcile, if that was even possible. Meanwhile, on the other side of the gala, Hannah and Alexander stood in tense conversation. Hannah had been Victoria's confidant and was fiercely protective. "If you really love her, you need to show it in a way that matters," Hannah told him bluntly. "Expensive parties and donations aren't going to fix this. You broke her trust. You have to earn it back, day by day, inch by inch." Between Gio's remorseful admissions and Hannah's cold truths, Alexander realized he was running out of time and strategies. While he had the power to sway boardrooms, controlling the heart of the woman he still loved was beyond financial or corporate might. The next morning, social media buzzed with images from the gala. A series of photos showed Alexander and Victoria conversing under the glow of the Met's grand chandeliers. Tabloid headlines pounced on the possibility of a reunion, spinning lurid theories about their alleged secret tryst. Blogs, entertainment shows, and even business magazines dissected every frame, proclaiming that Alexander was fervently trying to win back his ex-wife. Victoria's phone exploded with messages, some from old friends urging her to reconsider, others from strangers offering unsolicited advice. She turned off her notifications, determined not to let public speculation influence her private decisions. Behind the scenes, Alexander's PR team lobbied hard to control the narrative. They wanted to portray him as a repentant husband looking to atone for his past mistakes. But for once, Alexander seemed uninterested in media spin. He told his advisors that he didn't care what the tabloids said. He only cared about Victoria's forgiveness. In the midst of this uproar, Daniel Cruz expressed concern for Victoria's emotional well-being. They met for a walk along the Hudson River, where the crisp autumn air and the rustle of leaves offered a hint of solace. She confided that, despite her attempts to move forward, she felt haunted by the life she had once planned with Alexander. She admitted a part of her missed him, the version of him she had married, not the man who had betrayed her. Daniel listened quietly, offering no judgment. He suggested that perhaps closure was necessary, whether that meant a second chance with Alexander or a final goodbye. With that thought lingering in her mind, Victoria realized she needed clarity, honest, unfiltered conversation with Alexander, away from tabloids, away from corporate maneuvering, where they could confront the raw truths of their broken bond. At Victoria's request, she and Alexander met in a discreet location, a small inn on the outskirts of Manhattan, far from cameras and prying eyes. The place was quaint, surrounded by a grove of evergreens. Snow flurries drifted lazily outside, blanketing the landscape in a hushed whiteness. In the private lounge, a crackling fireplace offered warmth, its gentle light illuminating the gravity etched on both their faces. They sat across from each other, a low coffee table laden with untouched mugs of tea between them. Neither spoke at first. The tension was palpable. Finally, Alexander broke the silence. "I'm sorry," he said, voice cracking. "I wish I could take it all back. I was a fool." Victoria stared into the flames. "I believed we had it all," she replied softly. "A life together, built on love and trust. And then you threw it away for someone who didn't even care about you." Alexander swallowed hard. He explained how Charmaine had manipulated him, though he took full responsibility for succumbing to temptation. He confessed he had been overwhelmed by the constant demands of business, the pressure to be perfect, and how he foolishly sought escape in the wrong arms. Victoria listened, tears welling in her eyes as all her buried hurt surfaced. She recounted the night she waited for him, the loneliness, the humiliations, and the final blow of discovering his affair. "This isn't just about Charmaine," she said, her voice trembling. "It's about you betraying the vows we made. You broke my heart." Their conversation stretched into the late hours of the night, words spilling forth in raw honesty. For a fleeting moment, the spark they once shared glimmered between them. But as the clock ticked, Victoria found herself at a crossroads. Could she ever truly forgive him? Shortly after that emotional meeting, Victoria found herself caught in a swirl of indecision. She began to seek moments of solitude, visiting an old art studio in Brooklyn where she could paint undisturbed. It was there, amidst half-finished canvases and the scent of linseed oil, that Daniel surprised her with a visit. He stood in the doorway, a hesitant smile on his face. She welcomed him in, unsure of why he had come unannounced. After a few awkward pleasantries, he took a deep breath and confessed something that caught Victoria off guard. He had developed strong feelings for her. "You've been through so much," he said, his voice tender. "I see your strength, your kindness, your passion for helping others. I know you're not looking for a relationship right now, but I can't hide how I feel anymore." Victoria felt her heart lurch. She cared for Daniel deeply, but she was still entangled in the emotional wreckage left by Alexander. She looked down at her paint-splattered shoes, struggling to find the right words. Finally, she told Daniel the truth. "My heart is torn. Part of me still loves Alexander, or at least who he used to be, but he hurt me. And now here you are, offering something genuine. Daniel nodded, fighting the disappointment in his eyes. I want you to be happy. Victoria, truly happy. Whether that's with me or on your own or even back with Alexander, I just need you to know I'm here. Tears glistened in her eyes. She thanked him, appreciating his honesty and compassion more than words could express. As Daniel left the studio, Victoria was left with a sobering realization. She needed to decide not just whether to forgive Alexander, but whether she was ready to open her heart to someone new. While Victoria wrestled with matters of the heart, Alexander faced a crisis that threatened to overshadow even his personal struggles. Rumors spread of financial misconduct in one of Moretti Global's subsidiary companies, an energy startup that had been fast-tracked for massive investments. The allegations involved inflated revenue reports and misleading marketing to attract bigger deals. Though Alexander hadn't been directly involved, he had signed off on the expansions. Anxious investors began pulling out, and the company's stock took a nosedive. The media feasted on the story, linking it to Alexander's personal turmoil. Headlines like "Billionaire's Bad Decisions, Moretti Empire Teeters" painted him as a reckless leader, driven by ego and desperation. Alexander spent sleepless nights in crisis meetings with his legal and financial teams. Fear hovered over him like a dark cloud. Not only was he losing the woman he loved, but he also stood on the brink of losing his life's work, his father's legacy. In a desperate attempt to salvage the situation, Gio Moretti stepped back into the CEO role temporarily, while Alexander offered to take a leave of absence. This move, though humiliating for Alexander, was meant to restore confidence among shareholders. Meanwhile, an internal audit began, and investigators pored over every detail of the company's financial records. The stress took a visible toll on Alexander. His once commanding presence shrank under the weight of public scrutiny and remorse. Gone were the tailored suits and confident smirks. In their place was a haunted man struggling to make amends for a cascade of poor decisions. Oddly enough, the ordeal brought a kind of clarity. As his empire wobbled, Alexander realized that no amount of money or power could fill the emotional void left by Victoria's absence. In losing nearly everything, he finally grasped what truly mattered. News of Moretti Global's crisis reached Victoria through various channels, social media posts, concerned messages from friends, and headlines she couldn't avoid. She found herself feeling a surge of unexpected concern. Despite everything, she couldn't help but remember Alexander's initial passion for business, how he'd spoken about sustainable development, and how she'd admired his visionary spirit once upon a time. One afternoon, she visited her mother, Carmen, bringing groceries and herbal teas for their usual weekend routine. Over warm cups of chamomile, Carmen gently probed Victoria's feelings about Alexander. "Mija, you've always been strong," her mother said. "Your strength comes from love. You can still love someone and not let them hurt you again." The words resonated deeply. Victoria realized that forgiving Alexander didn't necessarily mean returning to him, but it could be a path to freeing herself from the bitterness and sadness that still weighed her down. Later that week, Victoria decided to visit Moretti Global's headquarters, unannounced. Clutching a small box of homemade empanadas, one of Alexander's favorite comfort foods, she made her way to the towering skyscraper. The security guard, recognizing her from past visits, let her through with a respectful nod. She found Alexander in his office, which was largely emptied after he had offered to step aside. He looked weary, eyes sunken, as though he'd been fighting a battle for weeks without rest. She held out the box. "Thought you might need something to eat," she said softly. He blinked in surprise, tears threatening to form. In that single gesture, Alexander saw a faint glimmer of hope perhaps, not for a grand reunion, but for some measure of forgiveness, a spark of the compassion that had once drawn him to her. He thanked her quietly, realizing how precious this moment was, however fleeting. Over the next few weeks, Victoria and Alexander found themselves in a delicate dance, cautious phone calls, brief text exchanges, and the occasional coffee meeting in hidden corners of the city. She insisted they meet discreetly, not wanting the media frenzy to distort what was, for her, an emotionally complex process. They talked about the internal audit and how Gio was stabilizing the company. They spoke about Alexander's therapy sessions, where he was working through his guilt and learning to cope with pressures in healthier ways. For the first time since their marriage began, they communicated openly, stripped of pretense. Meanwhile, Daniel respectfully kept his distance. He remained supportive, checking on Victoria with kind messages, but never pushing. He understood this was something she needed to resolve for herself. Hannah likewise encouraged Victoria to take her time, reminding her that forgiveness didn't have to equate to reconciliation. In a heated conversation one evening, Victoria confronted Alexander about every betrayal, every missed anniversary, every broken promise. He did not flinch from her words. He simply offered apologies and honest answers, no matter how painful they were to speak or hear. By the end, both were emotionally spent, but a sense of relief lingered like lancing a wound to begin healing. Finally, the moment came. They were walking in Central Park at dusk, the sky painted with orange and pink hues. Stopping by a small lake, Alexander looked at Victoria with trembling earnestness in his eyes. "If there's any chance at all, I will give it everything," he said, voice quivering with desperation. "But if you can't, too, understand." Victoria stared out at the water, tears in her eyes. She knew he meant every word, yet she also knew her heart, scarred as it was, had already reached its final decision. With the backdrop of a pastel sky fading into twilight, Victoria turned to face Alexander. In the lull of the moment, the breeze rustled the leaves overhead as though nature itself held its breath. She cupped his cheek gently, feeling the subtle stubble under her palm. "I forgive you," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Truly, I do, but I can't be with you anymore." Alexander's eyes closed, tears slipping down his cheeks. He had expected it, perhaps even deserved it, yet hearing the words spoken aloud felt like a final blow. "I understand," he managed, though his voice cracked. Victoria explained that while she believed in his remorse, she couldn't reconcile the betrayal with the future she now envisioned for herself. Too much had happened. Trust was not just bruised, but shattered. She wanted to move on, to live a life defined by her own values and aspirations, without the looming shadow of his power and wealth. She wished him well and hoped he could find healing in time. They stood like that for several moments, tears mingling with the last rays of sunlight. Then she stepped back, her hand slipping from his face. Each step she took away felt monumental, like the end of an era. She heard him call her name softly, but she did not stop. She had made her choice. In that moment, Alexander realized regret would be his lifelong companion. He had proven too fragile under the weight of temptation and pressure. No matter how many fortunes he amassed or philanthropic efforts he funded, he had lost the one thing. Money couldn't buy back a heart. And as he watched Victoria disappear into the twilight, he felt the profound finality of a love story that had ended in heartbreak. Months passed, and the city's seasons shifted from autumn's fading colors into winter's chill, and then onto the fresh bloom of spring. Life, as it often does, moved forward. The tabloids found new scandals to chase, and Moretti Global emerged from its crisis with renewed caution and transparency. Gio resumed his role as chairman, scaling back on risky ventures. Victoria's volunteer work at Project Hope turned into a permanent position. Her background in accounting and finance proved invaluable, and the organization expanded under her guidance. She relocated to a more spacious apartment with a small room dedicated to painting. Sunlight streamed in each morning, illuminating canvases filled with bright strokes of color, a testament to her journey from despair to renewal. Her friendship with Daniel remained just that, for a while friendship. Over time, however, the tender connection between them grew into a gentle romance. He never rushed her, allowing her the space to fully heal. When they finally did share a kiss, it felt like a promise of a hopeful tomorrow. As for Alexander, he dived deeper into self-improvement. Therapy became a non-negotiable part of his routine, and he focused on reshaping the company's culture to be less cutthroat and more people-centric. He even started a scholarship fund in Victoria's name, though he never told her about it directly. It was his silent tribute to the woman who had taught him the true cost of betrayal and the possibility of redemption, even if it wasn't enough to save their marriage. On a crisp April morning, Victoria received a brief, handwritten letter from Alexander. It contained no pleas for reconciliation, just a simple sentence: "Thank you for teaching me how to become a better man." She folded the letter and placed it in a keepsake box, a relic of a past life and a reminder of how far she had come. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey through heartbreak, betrayal, and ultimately self-discovery. Victoria and Alexander's story reminds us that love can be both fragile and transformative, and that sometimes walking away is the strongest choice one can make. While wealth and status may dazzle, true fulfillment often lies in honesty, compassion, and the courage to face our own flaws. If this story touched your heart, please like this video to show your support. Share it with friends who might appreciate this tale of resilience and renewal, and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss future stories that explore the heights and depths of human emotion. Your engagement helps us bring more content filled with drama, twists, and the timeless quest for love and redemption. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to sharing more captivating tales with you soon.